This bonus episode of the Agriculture Today podcast features one of three speakers at the 2019 Industrial Hemp Conference. The conference was held on May 22, 2019 in Pratt, Kansas. Links to the PowerPoint presentations of each of the three speakers can be found in the show notes of their respective episodes. In this episode, Braden Hoch, Industrial Hemp Specialist for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, provides a look at the statutory and regulatory responsibilities for the Industrial Hemp Research Program. Licensing individuals participating in the Industrial Hemp Research Program, producing statewide research reports, conducting regulatory inspections, and enforcing statute account for just some of the work assigned to the administration of the Industrial Hemp Research Program. Here's Braden Hoch.
Thank you, Landon, for the introduction. I really appreciate your company hosting the event today, and everyone in attendance, thank you for being here. We had some great speakers this morning. Dr. Jason Griffin setting some realistic expectations for industrial hemp cultivation, plant growth and development here in the state of Kansas. Mr. Grisson for divulging information relating to the legal landscape for the inevitable commercialization of industrial hemp. And then also Mr. Cavalar for providing business opportunities that will be available for individuals wanting to be a part of industrial hemp cultivation and the market as the U.S. moves towards that commercialization. And I would like to say a thank you to everyone that prepared food to our attendees today. It's a great service, and we really appreciate all your hard work preparing everything. So my name is Braden Hoch with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I am the Industrial Hemp Research Specialist. I am the new guy. I haven't been with the department for very long. I just started back in February. So industrial hemp, it is a new crop here in Kansas. And as am I, a new employee with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. I have learned quite a bit the last couple months, and we are gearing towards a successful 2019 research growing season. And I'm going to divulge and talk about information relating to where we are today and moving towards the inevitable commercialization due to passage of statute here in Kansas. So I just have a couple quick photos up here. This was taken by our noxious weed specialist, state specialist, when he visited Kentucky last year for one of their field days. And here's just some industrial hemp plants. These are female plants that are flowering, some buds, and then clean seed. So really, what we're researching here in Kansas this year in regards to the cultivation, processing, and distribution of industrial hemp falls under the guise of the 2014 Federal Farm Bill. So the 2014 Federal Farm Bill gave states the ability to develop agricultural pilot programs in regards to the study, growth, cultivation, and marketing of industrial hemp. So this authorized state departments to promulgate rules and regulations, but first there would have to be state statute that allowed those rules and regulations to be developed. Furthermore, it defined what industrial hemp was, and the 2014 Farm Bill has, I guess, it's a little outdated now because the 2018 Farm Bill provided more clarification, but it defined industrial hemp as cannabis sativa, any part of the plant, whether growing or not, with a delta-9 THC concentration of no more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis. And furthermore, it gave the ability for states to conduct and study and report on the economic viability and marketing strategies for this new crop. So some comparison between the 2014 and 2018 Federal Farm Bill. I'll talk about the 2018 Federal Farm Bill later in this slide when I talk about Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167. But once again, 2014 Federal Farm Bill only allowed research projects. There's commercial restrictions. The research projects had to be adopted by state programs, and it really didn't define testing standards for what THC, how it would actually be quantitated. But the 2018 Federal Farm Bill legalized hemp production, lifts commercial restrictions, but the programs, so the commercialization, is really based on a state's proposal to the USDA, and I'll talk about this later. And furthermore, it divulged information regarding how THC could actually be quantified and how it should be quantified, since there is no federal standard. So acting under the guise of the 2014 Federal Farm Bill, Kansas passed the Alternative Crop Research Act, Senate Bill 263. It was signed by the governor last year, April 20th, published in the Kansas Registrar and arranged by the reviser of statute as KSA 023901 through KSA 023903. So these are all on the reviser of statute's website, if you guys are wondering about information for the Alternative Crop Research Act. So the Alternative Crop Research Act outlined different research aspects that individuals participating in a research program could essentially study. Oversight and analysis of industrial hemp, its performance and growth based in different soils and harvesting methodologies. Economic feasibility of developing an industrial hemp market in Kansas and how different cultivars perform in Kansas. Analysis on value-added benefits, including environmental and how the state would recap with how these industrial hemp varieties perform. A study on the worldwide agronomy research stage relating to industrial hemp varieties, their production and utilization, and economic feasibility for attracting funding for industrial hemp research. So the current funding was provided through the USDA, and also different federal agencies are providing funding for state educational institutions, and then the study of pilot programs for economic development in different cities. So what's in the Alternative Crop Research Act? There's different sections. Section 1 is just simply definitions, and Section 2 gives the ability for the State Department of Agriculture to promulgate rules and regulations for monitoring industrial hemp production, cultivation, and processing. Also, it appointed an advisory board by the Secretary, and this advisory board would review and recommend proposals throughout the application process. And to date, that advisory board has reviewed approximately 328 research proposals. And that advisory board is made up of 9 current members. Jeff Ockenpaugh, the chair. We have 3 representatives, Representative Dove, Representative Johnson, and Representative Waymaster. 2 university faculty, Carrie Ebert and Andrew Tucker. The vice president for Kansas of Hemp, Kelly Ripple. The executive director for Kansas Crop Improvement Association, Steve Schuler, and the executive officer for Kansas Bureau of Investigation, Katie Wisman. Also in Section 2 of the Alternative Crop Research Act, allowed the department to oversee and license individuals participating in a research program. So essentially, individuals could seek a licensure, and these individuals would be conducting research on the state's behalf. It established statute that would require anyone participating in the program to consent to a state and national criminal history check. So that is one requirement. And also, again, the Secretary or the Department of Agriculture to develop the rules and regulations for this research project. So what are some of these regulations? As determined by the Secretary and input from stakeholders and different public meetings held throughout the development of the rules and regulations, there was different aspects of these rules and regulations divulged upon. So from the licensing approval process to appointing state advisory board members, the requirements for licensees, and the different license types that would be available for individuals, a fee schedule, and essentially monitoring of the industrial hemp crop with pre-harvest inspections and post-harvest inspections, and then ultimately reports generated from research done during the growing season. And the research done in the growing season is reported on parameters that were outlined in the research proposal that I will talk about here in a couple of slides. So what about this approval process for licensure would someone have to go through in order to grow industrial hemp? So individuals seeking licensure or participation in the program would have to provide information on whichever type of application they're applying for, maps identifying the research areas, and acknowledgments of restrictions for participation in the program. Furthermore, that regulation regarding these individuals having to submit and pass state and federal background checks and the appropriate fees with applications, and those background checks would have to be submitted also, and then ultimately proposals being reviewed and recommended by the Industrial Hemp State Advisory Board. That's one of the final processes during application approval. So what are these activities that the Kansas Department is licensing individuals for? So we have 4 different license types. We have grower, distributor, processor, and state educational institution licenses. So the growers, they can cultivate, plant, grow, harvest, condition, store, transport, and distribute industrial hemp plants, plant parts, seeds, or grains. Distributors can handle, condition, store, and distribute these industrial hemp plants, parts, seeds, or grains. And processors are just able to handle, store, and process them. And then state educational institution licenses are able to conduct any of those activities under grower, processors, and distributors. So this is just a little flow chart regarding the handling and what activities are really allowed during the program and the flow of industrial hemp materials. So then another requirement was individuals divulging information regarding to where the research would occur. So the department isn't necessarily just licensing individuals to conduct this research. They're licensing land that the research will occur and those individuals to conduct that research within that specific land area. So a requirement is identifying section township range, so a certain section. So this map is, we can say this is a section here, and it's identified as a section township range, and then they would have to identify research areas where the cultivation and planting of industrial hemp and harvesting would occur, and then they would have to provide information in regards to buildings where the materials would be stored throughout the season. And this was for all license types. Furthermore, there are land use restrictions regarding where the KDA can actually license these areas. So the research can only be conducted in lands that were provided in the application and licensed, but the restrictions include not being able to conduct any activities within 50 feet of a residential structure or within a quarter mile of a K through 12 school or public recreational area. So so when you look at an application, you have page 2, including all the individuals participating, page 3, all of the information regarding the land, and the next pages are information regarding to your research proposal. So the specific research question and objective that you would like to study during either if you're a grower, processor, or distributor. And it really depends on that license type you're seeking and the specific research question and the end use of the industrial hemp that you'll be growing for. So there's 6 sections. Section A is in regards to identifying that research question objective. Section B would be looking at your experimental design. So what treatments would you apply so you could research that question and objective. Section C is essentially what parameters will be measured and how your data will be collected. And Section D is essentially just talking about project implementation, the varieties that you'll be using, and some information about the land. Section E is again about data collection, how you're recording that, inputting it, and how you're going to analyze it. And then Section F is regarding how you're going to interpret all that data that you've collected during the growing season. So this research proposal is what the State Advisory Board has been looking at and either recommending or not recommending proposals for licensure. And individuals that have been granted licenses, essentially the Industrial Hemp Advisory Board has believed that the research that they have, the information regarding to the research that would be conducted is going to be of great benefit for the state of Kansas in regards to how great industrial hemp can be as a crop here moving forward. So more about the approval process. Once an application is recommended by the advisory board, it becomes conditionally approved and license payments have to be remitted. Once the license fees are received, the department issues a license. And currently, we have an application window still open due to the passage of Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167. The deadline is June 1. Previously, the deadline was March 1, but there was that deadline extension. So we are still accepting applications, but for subsequent growing seasons, the deadline is November 30th. And applications will be released near the end of September for next year. Furthermore, regarding information for the approval process and what the KDA can actually publicly divulge. So on our website, we have listed all active license information in regards to those participating, the primary licensee, their license number, and the county that they are operating in. And furthermore, from requests from law enforcement, we have to divulge information regarding to the individuals participating, and this is really for those individual safety because they are legally licensed in the state to conduct this research for industrial hemp, and we don't want to have any issues with the law enforcement in regards to what they are actually legally allowed to do. So this is the fee schedule. The application fee is $200, and then we have license fee for the growers, processors, and distributors. The growers license is $1,000, distributors license is $2,000, and then we have a tier of processing license fees. So a grain and fiber processor, the fee would be $3,000, and a floral processor would be $6,000. Now I'll talk about these processor types a little bit further on. And there's fees associated with sampling and subsequent sampling. So subsequent sampling would require additional sampling fees and laboratory testings. And then there is a modification fee to a license. So that modification fee only pertains to an active license. And if a modification would like to be made, they have to submit that information to the Department of Ag. And there's been many challenges for licensed growers and processors and distributors here just in 2019. So we are willing to work with those individuals to try to make it the best of the growing season. Some other rules and regulations that are very pertinent are that of signage. So anyone participating in the program has to post signage outside their research area that indicates the Department of Agriculture Industrial Hemp Research Program, their name, their license, and the telephone number for the Department of Ag. And this is because when an inspector comes out to a field and does a pre-harvest inspection or post-harvest inspection, they're able to correctly identify the area, and then also this is important for law enforcement agencies to know areas that are actually licensed by the Department of Agriculture where this industrial hemp cultivation is legal.
You guys already have those signs made up?
Individuals have to create their own signs, and the signs requirements are 3x3 with the appropriate information posted outside the research areas. So other than signage, some other requirements relate to pre-harvest inspections and testing. So before any industrial hemp crops are harvested, the primary licensee has to indicate to the department when that harvest is going to occur, no later than 30 days before that harvest. So an inspector has to come out, take a sample of that industrial hemp to ensure that it meets the statutory requirement. And if it does meet the statutory requirement, a passing report of analysis is issued. And if not, there's a couple different options that can be taken. Either a grower can request a subsequent sampling to determine if there was an issue with the first sample, or they can voluntarily destroy that specific crop. So issues with reporting THC analysis, if a crop tests higher than 2%, then the testing results may be divulged to the KBI and local law enforcement agencies. So with industrial hemp, specifically these floral varieties, growers that are growing for floral material, specifically CBD oil, a lot of the varieties, if you allow them to go too long, or you have extremely bad genetics, then those growers really are at much more risk, and they have to, for their own sake, they should be conducting tests throughout the season to determine when they should harvest and be compliant with the statute. So this is in regards to also the pre-harvest testing and post-harvest actions. So once a licensee receives a passing report of analysis for that crop, they have to harvest the crop within 10 days to be granted a harvest certificate, and with that harvest certificate needs to accompany all harvested industrial hemp materials. Post-harvest inspections relates more to distributors and processors, but growers may be subject to it. So this is in regards to essentially after growing conditions have been satisfied and harvest have been done, whenever a sample is collected, a passing report of analysis has to be issued for those materials to be handled and processed. This harvest certificate, essentially, when a grower has been granted that passing report of analysis, they completed the harvest, they have to notify the department within 5 days that the harvest is complete for the harvest certificate to be issued. And there's some specific parameters that have to be indicated: the official name of the industrial hemp, so the variety, the date of each license harvest, the GPS coordinates for where it was harvested, so that gives us information in regards to the licensed research area it came out of, and a statement of intended end use. So was this variety for fiber production, grain production, or for floral production? And once again, with any harvested industrial hemp here in Kansas, that harvest certificate is extremely pertinent because it needs to accompany any of that harvested industrial hemp. So I'm not going to talk about reports so much, but there are reports required. So once an individual plants industrial hemp in one of those research areas, they have to submit a notification to the Department of Agriculture no more than 15 days after that planting occurs. A voluntarily withdrawal port is essentially if an individual doesn't want to participate in the program any longer. We also have pre-harvest reports. So before that harvest occurs, that pre-harvest report would be submitted, like I just talked about earlier. And then production reports relating to 30 days after a harvest. So how much biomass was collected for a variety and the intended end use. And then we have the different reports for distributors and processors. So this production report just relates to growers, and for distributors and processors, that report is a little bit different. But they're, for distributors and processors, they're due no later than November 30th. And then the research report is due by all license types, or all primary licensees, and this has to be submitted no later than the 30th. And that's what Dr. Griffin was asking. Essentially, the research report ties back to the question and objective and all the parameters that were collected during the research of the specific research that you're conducting on industrial hemp. So regarding growing season information for the research program, we have the program rules and regulations on our website, and these are the annotated rules and regs. If you would like to see the official rules and regs, they can be found in the Revisor of Statutes website. But this is information regarding to activities and licensure of the different license types. Also, we have a section where we have posted comments to common questions relating licensure for the industrial hemp research programs and activities that would fall under the guise of those different activities that we're licensing for. So Mr. Cavalar spoke about business opportunities with industrial hemp. I'm just going to briefly talk about these because even though this is a research program, there is the ability for individuals to start developing those business relationships and looking towards how they can make this commodity here for the state. So other than growing industrial hemp and selling it, it's really not so clear-cut how a grower and processor may be able to generate money. But for distributors and processors, but for distributors, again, they're licensed to distribute, transport, condition, handle, and store industrial hemp plants, plant parts, seeds, or grains. Currently here in Kansas, when the 2019 program started up, there was essentially no germplasm here in the state because individuals hadn't been licensed yet. So these individuals have had to go out of state to acquire germplasm. But these distributors now that are licensed are able to establish connections with distributors out of state to bring germplasm in. And also these distributors are able to transport materials that have been harvested by growers. So they're really bridging the connection between processors and growers. Furthermore, they're able to establish laboratories for THC validation and cannabinoid quantitation. So there's been interest with several water testing facilities and water testing labs where they want to have this service available for growers so those growers can do periodic testing of their crops to make sure that their crop is compliant. So talking about the different types of processors and the business opportunities that exist, for floral processors, the main thing is CBD oil. The market is huge here in the United States. Production in leading states such as Montana and Kentucky. I'll just have this is a little information. So the NASDA briefing for industrial hemp production, Montana had provided information in regards to acreage and the percent of acreage that is in CBD production. So 95% of all industrial hemp production in the state of Montana for 2018 was for floral material, so specifically in CBD varieties. And in 2019, Kentucky is projecting about 75% of all industrial hemp production for floral material. So this here is just, the structure of cannabidiol, and that is what the market in the United States is currently largely growing towards. The other type of processor is a grain processor. So Alex divulged information regarding to the different end uses for industrial hemp grain, hemp seed oil, so used in beauty products, cosmetics, and also hemp protein that could possibly be used in foods. The market here in the United States isn't currently established compared to that of CBD, but industry leaders are working towards that very actively. Furthermore, fiber processors, they're looking to use the biomass of the CBD, so the phloem and xylem materials, and it can be used and incorporated in building materials, fabrics, animal beddings, injectable molds, and plastics. And once again, the market is not currently established just because there's a lack of processing infrastructure. So looking at information for the 2019 Industrial Hemp Research Program, currently, this data was taken on May 20th, but this is just a progression from April 11th to the 20th of May with the active grower, distributor, processor, and university licenses. So currently we have 213 active licensees here in Kansas. 158 of those are growers, 16 distributors, 32 processors, and 7 university licenses. So these are counties with active growers licenses, and the table is the top 20 counties with the most acreage. So we have Kiowa County, Russell County, Ford County, Wabaunsee, and the number of licensees or number of licenses for each one of those counties. So this figure will dynamically change as the department issues more licenses and as individuals voluntarily withdraw from the program. So this is simply just a snapshot of land that has been licensed by the Department of Ag here in 2019 to this point. This is just a large table of all the active growers per county, and again, the information will change dynamically, but to this point we have issued licenses that encompasses 3,800 acres here in Kansas. This number of licensed acres won't refer to the number of acres that are actually planted or harvested, because those numbers may change as we receive planting reports and what are indicated in harvest reports and harvest and production reports. Moving on from growers, these are counties that have active distributors licenses. Currently, we have 26 active distributors, and some counties have multiple distributors in them. But we can see we have multiple distributors in Sedgwick, Reno, Johnson County, and Haskell County. Furthermore, licensed processors. We have 32 licensed processors here in the state of Kansas. Quite a few in Reno County. And the interesting fact regarding these processors, 95% of them will be processing for floral material. We have one processor in Russell County that will be processing for fiber, and one processor in Cloud County that will be processing for grain and floral material. But currently, 95% of the processors will be processing CBD varieties of industrial hemp, or what they have at least indicated. The last license type, the state educational institution licenses, Dr. Griffin showed a map of where the different licensed research areas for Kansas State are. So currently Kansas State is the only university that has applied for licenses. So we have licenses in Sedgwick County, Thomas County, Riley, and Johnson County. And we've been receiving more applications for state educational institution licenses to research various aspects in regards to industrial hemp, the use in animal feed. This active license information can be found on the Kansas Department of Agriculture's website. So on the website, we have information relating to the primary licensee's first and last name, their license number, and their county of operation. The list is sorted by alphabetically by last name, and soon we're hoping to have figures put up for visual pleasure, and then also dynamic figures in the future. So it can be much more interactive for the one accessing that information. So I spoke about how we're acting under the guise of the 2014 Federal Farm Bill. The 2018 Federal Farm Bill established states to promulgate rules and regulations for the commercialization of industrial hemp. But first, so it legalizes industrial hemp, removing it from a Schedule I drug from the Controlled Substance Act, lifted commercial restrictions regards to eligibility for federal crop insurance and USDA grants. But the program acceptance is based on a state's submission to the USDA. So once a state submits that program to the USDA has a time period of 60 days to respond if those rules and regulations will be adequate. Furthermore, it defines information regarding to how THC testing has to be done, so either using a post-decarb THC or equivalent standard, and relates information to what effective disposal is. So that term of effective disposal isn't greatly defined, but it's left up to the states to how they would like to proceed defining that term. And then also it establishes violations and rough guidelines for the remediation of certain violations that could occur during a commercial program. So it also redefined what hemp was. So cannabis sativa, any part of the plant, including seeds, all derivatives, extract, cannabinoids, isomers, salts, and salts of the acids, whether growing or not, having a THC concentration that did not exceed 0.3% on a dry weight basis. Furthermore, it did not grant the use of hemp and hemp products in food for humans or animals. The FDA still has regulatory authority over this, and there's quite a bit of research that the FDA will be looking at, and state educational institutions regarding the use of different cannabinoids in animal feed, and essentially research in regards to how psychoactive CBD actually is. So, due to the passage of Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167, the bill was signed on April 18th by the governor, and this allows for the establishment of commercial industrial hemp production here in the state of Kansas. So, means to create this commercial industrial hemp program, requires the Department of Agriculture to promulgate rules and regulations in accordance with federal law. So, what in Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167, there were certain guidelines that established for the commercial program. So the requirements, violations, eligibility in the program, fingerprinting requirements, and then also those rules and regulations and the associated fees. Furthermore, Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167 made changes and will be making changes to the Industrial Hemp Research Program. And it will be establishing a hemp processor's registration once the commercialization happens. And it also offered information regarding prohibitions of specific products containing industrial hemp. And I will talk about all of these now. So developing these commercial regulations, this is just a flow chart in regards to how it actually occurs in the regulatory process. So the first step was the passage of Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167, allowing statute for the promulgation of rules and regulations. And there's been much discussion in regards to the statute and the need for these regulations for the commercialization of industrial hemp. And currently, the KDA is developing and drafting these rules and regulations. But later on, stakeholders will review the rules and regulations, and revisions and edits will be made so a final version can be acceptable for the state and all stakeholders, and then it'll enter a regulatory process. So this regulatory process took 115 days for the Industrial Hemp Research Program, and it does not happen at the snap of fingers. Takes a little bit while, but essentially the rules and regulations have to be submitted to different state departments. So Department of Budget, they had looked at the economic impact statement for the Industrial Hemp Research Program. Rules and regulations were then submitted to the Department of Administration and the Attorney General, and public hearing notice was submitted to the Secretary of State, and legislative joint committees looked at these rules and regulations and revised them as necessary. A public hearing was held for comments regarding the regulations, and once they were approved and filed, they would be published in the Kansas Registrar, and the regulations would take effect. So regarding this, after approval with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, the regulations would be submitted to the USDA for approval, and then once approval happens, they would be submitted. Once they were approved by the USDA, those rules and regulations would be published. So this is, just submission to the USDA and adoption and enforcement regarding the statute. So we had here the regulatory process. This was the regulatory process for the research program, and then once that regulatory process occurs, submission of those rules and regs and adoption. So other than establishing the means of creating a commercial industrial hemp research program, there are changes creating the means for a commercial program. It makes changes to the Industrial Hemp Research Program, which we are currently operating in. So it reopened the application window, changed the seed requirement for the research program, changed the modification fee, changed how the KDA and the state looks at drug felonies and eligibility, and the KDA can no longer require license plate information. But furthermore, once a commercial program is established, the research program discontinues. So regarding these changes, the application window reopening until June 1, realistically, those applying for growers' licenses are a little late because the approval process can take up to 3 to 4 weeks, because this is just essentially contingent on the receipt of the background check for all individuals on the application. But more realistically, created more opportunity for processors and growers because these activities will be occurring later in the season. Another change to the research program is in regards to the use of authorized seed, or the change in seed requirement. So the requirement of the research program before Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167 was that of only certified seed. So only certified seed could be planted and grown. But due to this change, beginning July 1, the use of authorized seed can happen. So what this means is, at the time of a pre-harvest inspection, the KDA inspector will inquire if a certificate of analysis for that approved variety is on hand and on file that would meet our statutory requirements. So the KDA acknowledges there's a weird transitional period between when an industrial hemp crop needs to be planted and when this rule and regulation actually comes into effect. So essentially, it's at the time of a pre-harvest inspection. If all that documentation is complete, then there won't be any issues with compliance. And if anyone has any questions regarding the seed requirement change, I would be happy to answer questions during our panel discussion. Another change is the modification change. So as of July 1, the modification fee will be reduced from $750 to $50. That's per change. And again, in 2019, there's been quite a bit of struggles with the growers obtaining germplasm. So we understand those struggles. And essentially, if someone's wanting to make a modification, they submit those modifications, and it's up to the discretion of the secretary if modification fees will be imposed. But changes to a research license cannot divert from the research proposal, but changes in regards to sections, areas, participants, vehicles, and varieties may be done to an active license. Another change is in regards to the 10-year drug felony look-back. So previously, it was a lifetime look-back, but the new statute, effective July 1, would not disqualify any individual that has a drug-related felony, if that felony had occurred longer than 10 years before that licensure. Furthermore, other than the Senate substitute for House Bill 2167 establishing the means of creating an industrial hemp commercial program and changing the Industrial Hemp Research Program, it's going to develop a hemp processors registry. So a hemp processors registry will occur once that commercialization happens. The bill established violations for these processors and them being responsible for their own background checks and their employees' background checks, but they still have to conform to certain rules and regulations that have been passed by the KDA. So, other than those three, main topics that Senate Substitute for House Bill 2167 addressed, one of the larger ones is regarding the prohibition of products and certain sentencing guidelines. So, before it was very unclear of what industrial hemp could be used in and be used for, and essentially the bill prohibits the use of industrial hemp in cigarettes, cigars, chew, dip, and in vaporizing devices.
This has been a bonus episode of the Agriculture Today podcast. Agriculture Today is produced each weekday, holidays excluded. To listen to the latest episode or subscribe, visit agtoday.net. Agriculture Today is produced by the News Media Services Unit of the Department of Communications and Agricultural Education in the College of Agriculture at Kansas State University.